welcome to the home of Unitarian Universalism in Bismarck, Mandan, which is in your home. In our Unitarian Universalist community, we celebrate diversity of beliefs. The living tradition we share draws from many sources. Our tradition recognizes our own direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder which opens us to the forces which create and uphold life. We draw from words and deeds of prophetic women and men which challenge us to confront powers and structures of oppression with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. We draw from wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. Also from teachings which call us to love our neighbors as ourselves, as well as spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. With this congregation, we create a space to nurture each other, be nurtured on our life journey, and put our beliefs into action through work in our communities and the wider world. My name is Mary Wilson, and I'm the chair of the Social Action Working Group and a member of the Committee on Ministries. Our minister, Reverend Elizabeth Soley, and I will be facilitating today's service, and Alicia Fowl will be leading the music portions of this service. And right here is the part of the service where you're invited to be fully present in the space. When we're physically in the building together, we have a built-in reminder here to let people turn off or silence their cell phones now. And I'll just hold this space as we're all probably adapting and figuring out how to be present together while in the same times apart from our own homes. And I have, this is also the time that my cat has decided to join in the room with, and Tim and Tiata are sitting right off camera as well. So right now, I'm gonna invite you to join in the shared singing, which since if you're muted, you can sing right along and don't have to worry about drowning out Alicia. And I'm gonna share the text on the screen. And I ask you now to join me in a spirit of meditation, reflection, or prayer as we deepen into our service. And I share this prayer from Elizabeth Wynn. It's called For When I Really Don't Want to Learn This. And it's been kind of applicable to a lot of the lead up for me for this. Spirit, I would really rather not learn this. Didn't think I needed to. I thought someone else could do it. Thought a leader was coming to do it. Thought the young people could do it, or the elders could do it, or the professionals. Or I didn't want to learn it because it means letting go of something I hold dear, letting go of being someone who knows the answers, letting go of being someone who doesn't know, letting go of the way I see the world, letting go of how I might have to change, letting go of certainty, of logic, of facts, of control, of the myth that you can live on this earth and not harm, or the myth that I can't learn anything new. Help me to learn it, please. And then help me to live what I have learned and to do right by the gift of being taught.
So this morning we'll light our chalices from home again, and we're going to do this every week while we're streaming. So always bring your chalice to pajama church. So I have the empty chair this morning pulled up next to me, and invited into the room are all the people who have lost their lives to the coronavirus, and all the people struggling with any illness or with deaths in this complicated time of isolation. I also invite into the room all the people in the fellowship who could not get on this call. Unitarians and Universalists are meeting all over the world this morning. We are part of a larger whole and part of something wonderful. May we feel this solidarity as we each light a chalice this morning, knowing other chalices are also being lit in Bismarck and Anchorage, Romania, and India. We are in good company. So let us light our chalices now. Let's see. All right. So take a moment and look at all the names that are on your screen. It's good to be together this morning. Our chalice reading is by Paul Dodoroff. For this 1 hour, Spirit of life, we let go. For this 1 hour, may we let go of our anxieties, our fears, our anger, our self-doubts, our regrets, our petty grievances, and our distractions. If only for this 1 hour, let the flames of our chalices burn from our hearts and minds and light our way to peace and serenity for this one holy hour. Alicia will now lead us in song, and Mary will put up the words. And make sure that you've muted and stopped your video again. And be muted, but sing loud enough that we can all feel you.
That I might know
Acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes the unique and enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. This week, Mary Wilson will share some information about the growing practice of giving land acknowledgements and offer some of her own reflections about how we claim belonging, and why it matters. Please welcome Mary.
So I'd like to begin with acknowledging our connection to the earth, to the water, to this place and this time, and to the people and the forces, both seen and unseen, that have brought us to this moment. And these are connections that we all have. Our shared song does that too, and I'm gonna let you know right now that I've been loving that part of our new service. Because of who I am and the learning path that I've committed to, I'm also going to make that acknowledgement in Dakota, in the Dakota language. Wakantanka, daku wakanshkanshkan, ampetu washte wan ed unhinajupi, ukran pidan uyayapi. Great Spirit, and that which is that spirit, that mystery that moves between all of us and all things. It's brought us to this day, this good day, and for that, we're thankful. Unchimaka akon untipi. We live on Grandmother Earth. Minishoshe wakpa agadagada untipi. We live alongside the Missouri River, the Big Muddy River. Machtiatcho ochdate unyunkapi yukhan onie owanjina uniapi. So we are sitting beneath a blue sky today, and we all breathe the same air. Now, right now, the grass is becoming green. And spring is arriving here. So all of these things together, we're recognizing, and for that, we say thank you. So some good advice that I got a while back is that when you're addressing people, you should share context before content. And because that's pretty much the message that I'm going to share, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to first share something before I talk about what land acknowledgement is. I'm going to share something about how I came to be here and talking to you about this practice. So I grew up in Vermont along a different river called the Connecticut River, like some people. And when I first came to this place that you all call North Dakota, I was 21 years old. I was a 21-year-old college student majoring in environmental studies and comparative literature in Oberlin, Ohio. I came to North Dakota as a participant of something called the South Dakota program. This was a service learning study abroad program. In the brochure, which I unearthed last night in preparing for this, it said, you quote, "You will live and serve on an American Indian reservation, studying the history, culture, and issues of the Indians of the Great Plains and directly encountering the issues and concerns confronting this culture within a culture." So, so that was in the fall. That was the fall semester of 2001, and this means that after just only a week into when my internship on the reservation started, was September 11th, 2001, which my daughter is sitting here. I'm going to explain that means that there were 2 airplanes that were deliberately crashed into some great big towers in New York City, which were, so people were attacking symbols of United States commerce and military, because there was also attack on the Pentagon, which is in Washington, D.C. And I had just been there. On my way here, I had just been in New York visiting a friend who lived there. And I remember her showing me the sights and pointing towards those towers. And about 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks or something, I was in the car on my way to Bismarck for a meeting, and I turned off my radio just before that attack would have been broadcast. And when I got to the hotel where the meeting was happening, I walked in and I was waiting in the lobby, and I noticed all these people flocking around the television, and my first thought was that people just like can't get enough TV. It took me a few minutes to figure out what's going on. So the things that I learned over that term, it was an academic term, like 10 weeks or something, was actually finished before Thanksgiving holiday. But the things that I learned or was exposed to during that time called into question the legitimacy not only of the terms North and South Dakota, the states, but also the nation state and of territorial boundaries, and also who defines what is history or prehistory, what is science, what is evidence and myth, what is governments and democracy and consent. Maybe question and rethink about healing and education, religion and spirituality, what ancestral connection means, and what is possible once we leave this plane. So basically, just before I got ready to graduate from a 4-year degree, this experience challenged and upended everything I thought I knew about anything and my place in the world. It rearranged everything I thought I might know. Oh, I just said that. And including what I understood about being an environmentalist. I was an environmental studies major, and the relationship between, or the distinction between the natural world and the cultural world. So then less than a year later, I graduated, and without too much of a plan, I made my way back to the reservation. And then within a couple of months, I got a job working in the same office where I had interned, which was the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. I was working there for 2 years, and during that time, I lived first in Mobridge, and then in Mandan, and then moved onto the reservation. And I spent a lot for my job. I was watching and learning and meeting with federal land managers and watching the director of that program, who's sitting right next to me now, is Tim, was Tim then, and I watched him meeting like with federal land managers, including the Army Corps of Engineers, and assert rights to and expertise in defining on their own terms what are properties of religious and cultural significance, which is a legal category, and then identifying and interpreting the stone feature sites that his ancestors had left on the prairie and that he had learned about from his grandmother and uncles, and learned about these being often our burial sites, and also a form of documentation and places of prayer, and a documentation of commitments that people made to each other and to themselves and to a higher power. So that was the work scene, but the life continued. I went after those 2 years. I went back to Vermont. There's a law school pretty close to where I grew up that has a really well-known environmental law program, and I got a master's there, and then came back to the res. We got married, birth to a baby, which and buried. We had, he died. Worked in elementary school, worked again for the tribal government, learned how to grow a garden on the prairie, traveled to meetings, came to Bismarck every week for groceries, found a yoga community in Bismarck and Mandan. In 2009, our daughter Tiata was born. I became really involved in Lakota language revitalization, horses. These are things aren't exactly in order, but I'm just giving you the, a lot of life happened in those times. And so, and this is just all to sort of set the stage for where I was here and how I was here. And I think a lot of you can relate to a lot of those things because you live here too. So now I'm going to transition to this topic of land acknowledgement. And during the course of preparing for this, we were scheduled to just last week have for World Water Day show a film in the library that the EU was hosting an event about. It's called The Conquer and the Eagle. But anyhow, that got postponed, as you know. And but anyways, as part of that event, you're encouraged to participants in that it's a like national-wide campaign. But participants were encouraged to open the event with a land acknowledgement. And I was already, planning on talking about this for a service. But so I'm just going to share with you the guide that was shared like in preparation for creating that land acknowledgement, or I'm going to share excerpts from it because it's 10 pages. And I'm not going to read the whole 10 pages. But this is a 10-page guide published by the US Department of Arts and Culture. And I actually have it right here. I can show you what it looks like, but there are pictures throughout, and a lot of them are pictures from this area. So in some ways, it's meant for us. I mean, it's meant for everyone, but. So this guide calls on all individuals and organizations to open all public events and gatherings with acknowledgement of the traditional native inhabitants of the land. And it was published in the fall of 2017. And so it offers the following list of reasons for introducing the practice of land acknowledgement. That this is a way to offer recognition and respect. It's a way to counter the doctrine of discovery, with the true story of the people who were already here. A way to create broader public awareness of the history that has led to this moment. A way to begin to repair relationships with Native communities and with the land. A way to support larger truth-telling and reconciliation efforts. A way to remind people that colonization is an ongoing process, with Native lands still occupied due to deceptive and broken treaties and practices of eminent domain and other mechanisms intended to benefit government or corporate America. It's a way to take a cue from Indigenous protocols, opening up spaces with reverence and respect. And it's a way to inspire ongoing action and relationships. So many countries, this is still reading from the guide, many countries are far ahead of the United States in adopting this practice. In Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, there are protocols, maps, and pronunciation guides readily available. Many universities have made acknowledgement a policy, providing simple sample templates for students, staff, and faculty. Beginning in 2016, all Toronto public schools began opening their school days with a statement of acknowledgement. The University of Alberta offers this explanation of acknowledgement. To acknowledge the traditional territory is to recognize its longer history, reaching beyond colonialization and the establishment of European colonies, as well as its significance for the Indigenous peoples who live and continue to live upon this territory and whose practices and spiritualities were tied to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the land and its other inhabitants today. The guide goes on to offer a few disclaimers about this practice of making land acknowledgements. They say it's simple and also not so simple. In some cases, traditional inhabitants of a place may be clear. In other cases, whom to recognize is much less so. Do your research. While the act of naming traditional inhabitants may not take much time, moving into right relationship requires preparation. I'm going to say that this guide doesn't offer the one right way to acknowledge. What's offered here is not a comprehensive checklist or a set of universally acceptable protocols. There are currently 567 federally recognized tribal nations, each with its own history and protocols for welcome and acknowledgement. There are also state-recognized tribes and peoples, including Native Hawaiians who reside on 6 islands. There is no one way of doing this. Acknowledgement is made meaningful through specific context and relationship. Whenever possible, the best entry point into the practice of acknowledgement is through relationship and dialogue with Native communities in the area. The practice of formal welcome and acknowledgement of land is not new. Acknowledgement has long been practiced, typically in much more nuanced, formal, and ceremonial ways within Indigenous communities. Many artists, activists, presenters, academics, and others have been starting events with acknowledgement for decades. By publishing this guide, we hope to draw on these histories to help spark a movement to make acknowledgement commonplace. Acknowledgement is but a first step. It does not stand in for relationship and action, but can begin to point toward deeper possibilities for decolonizing relationships with people and place. And then one excerpt that I had highlighted, the truth is complicated. Beneath the contemporary surface of any site in the United States, there are histories of belonging that have been erased, overlooked, contested, and forgotten, all ways to support ideas like manifest destiny, which justified the conquest of native lands. So now I'm going to transition back to talking about how I see this relating to me personally and to us as a congregation. And I'm kind of going back to well, before I do that, I'd like to, there was a video that went along with this, and we played with showing it, but that was pretty complicated. And so I did take down some of the words of the people who in the video. Although I think I'm gonna share that later. So to go back to my story, when the water protector movement at Standing Rock, which culminated or manifested like most dramatically in the huge encampment of water protectors right off the reservation boundaries, and on right there on the northern border of the reservation. When that happened, it really took me by surprise. So as I hope you got from my story about my background, I was involved in like environmental issues both before moving here, but as a tribal employee for some time, and not even in 2014, but at that time, Tim and I, my husband and I, had our own consulting business called Makoche Woapi, which means earth writings. So it's a continuation of the work that we were both doing in the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, although sort of from a different angle, of identifying these places of cultural significance and protecting them, working towards protecting and identifying. So, but it was, it still caught me unaware, because I had been going to meetings and been aware. I was pretty active in the learning about and sort of resisting and trying to get word out about the Keystone XL pipeline, which had been been proposed for years even before this. And so, but I felt pretty alone in that a lot of the time. And so when there was this like groundswell of popular, movement and energy around the Dakota Access Pipeline, I was surprised. I didn't see that coming. And there was a statement that I found in, it's actually a grant report that for my current work I have access to, but the statement is that Standing Rock represented a profound shift in the way people are organizing in defense of the planet. There is new activism centered around indigenous philosophies and relationship to the planet. And then I'm pretty sure it was my friend and colleague, Sasheen, whose words are here. I messaged her about this earlier in the week. She says, our indigenous ancestors derived their knowledge and wisdom from Mother Earth. In order to survive, they had to learn to live with the earth. Mother Earth is our culture. Indigenous peoples are uniquely able to respond for caring for her. We are grounded through her. When our politics and sovereignty are aligned with this responsibility, we are uniquely powerful. So I theoretically wanted all of that to be true, but I sort of wasn't prepared to see what happened when the world came. And so just like how when I came in 2001 as a student and learned about modern life on reservation and here, just like that totally upended my concept of identity as a citizen. The water protector movement really disrupted my idea of what was possible or likely when it came to environmental activism. And I'll have to be honest that there was, camp was disruptive to the status quo, which was what the purpose was, and there was a lot of amazing things that came from that, and I found a lot of hope in that and beauty in that, but also there were things about it that were really uncomfortable for me, and disruptive. And among other things, like people from other parts of my life started showing up, you know, on the res, or at least at camp, and people like I had connected to for a real long time suddenly, you know, knew about where I was. And this was true for, you know, a lot of people. And there were people from Standing Rock, Indigenous community leaders that were sometimes upstaged by non-Native celebrities or activists, or just other charismatic people who kind of just appeared at camp, and who came from we didn't know where. And there were also people who infiltrated the movement. And then, so all this happened, and it changed a lot of relationships, good and not so good, or just difficult. It was an adjustment, right? And then not everyone, but most people left. Some people left because they felt that that was the right thing to do. They were sort of asked to leave, and the weather conditions, you know, it was the sensible thing to do. Other people were made to leave, some by the tribal authorities, and some by ultimately the federal and state law enforcement. And then signs went up about, you know, no trespassing. And it was kind of like everything was cleared out, and it felt like it was an effort to erase what had happened. And that was really painful. It was painful for me, and it was painful for a lot of people. There were a lot of people who had found some really deep, meaningful sense of belonging, and like new sense of possibility at camp, and living there and living in this different way together, and this connection. You know, some people were reconnecting to their roots, to their indigenous identity. Some people were just sort of like awakening to what that meant, and really empowered by it, and both non-Native and Indigenous folks. And so taking that away really hurt a lot of people. And so there's a lot of healing to be done. And I can imagine that there's a lot of that just as it was disruptive to me, and the community that I was part of in Standing Rock, that it was disruptive to the community here, and including the UU community. And I know that, you know, you all, or so many people, really gave a lot of themselves and showed a lot of support. But I know it was difficult in a lot of ways. And I know that, like for me in Standing Rock, there was really only been very few times where we've come together as a community there. I mean, now it's been, you know, 3 years or 4 years, going on 4 years, to kind of process things, but there's not a lot of spaces to do that in, although I keep finding them. And I think that that's necessary here as well. And I know that I've been in some of those conversations, but I just think it's a long process, and there are lots and lots of layers to that. And so what I want to say kind of is that my moving to Bismarck and finding the UU and finding connections here with with you all in this community has been something that's healing for me, and part of that healing process. And I can see that that the growth and belonging that some people felt, you know, as real positives, but also it can also at the same time felt alienating and uncomfortable. And I think as I've been sort of processing this, part of what that was about for me, and I imagine for other people too, it was, it calls into question like our belonging to this place. And that is part of what, where I can see that land acknowledgements, this practice of land acknowledgements has something to offer. It is a tool to it, but I also think that we need to go beyond that and go slow with it and go do it with intention. So I'm going to share just some of the words of some of those people from the video. So there's a woman named Laurie Courtier, who's my age-ish, I would guess. And she says the important thing would be that, she's Oglala Lakota. And she said the important thing would be that when folks would then sit with that. What does it mean that our settlement is occupying this space? And what responsibility do I have considering that legacy to contemporary things? And how do I stop distancing myself from that? Ideally, that would be the impact that this has. And then there's, and then she actually, there's like, that's one clip of her, and then a little bit later, it goes to something else, and then a little bit later, she, I didn't write down these words, but she's thinking, and she's like, I'm imagining it. I'm imagining what that would be like, and it's really beautiful. And the guide asks people to imagine what that's like. And so then there's this other quote from Ron Martinez, who's Ron Martinez Looking Elk, who's from Isleta Pueblo. He says, we're at a time where non-native cultures are understanding the traditions of indigenous people for probably the first time in our histories. So when I go to New Zealand, the protocol is to acknowledge each other's ancestors and your mountains and your rivers. And that's such a beautiful tradition. When people in that space say, we acknowledge who you are, this land, where your people come from, they are saying we acknowledge a relationship, but we're also creating a relationship. And he says, this is a good thing. And then the last one that I'm going to share is from Mary Bordeaux, who's Sichanku Lakota, and she starts it off by saying, giving the context that she was at a place in Minneapolis, which I think is where she's living, that she said, I was at this event, there's mostly non-natives, lots of people getting started, and then the executive director stood up and made a land acknowledgement. And she says, my guard went down. I was more relaxed because by saying that, that means she understands something that you can't talk about. It just relaxed me as a minority, as a woman, as a Native person. It just pulled away this layer that's always there. And I wanted to share that one particularly because it kind of reminded me of when I first came to the UU, The first time I came, I saw that banner, and it was the banner that's outside the building that says "We Stand with Standing Rock." And I was going to, it was when encampments were up. It was like in October 2016, and I was coming for a teach-in about the movement, and I had some out-of-town people that, actually a rabbinical student that I'm in her like professor who was, who came as well. And so that banner showed me that I was in the right place, and I, came in, and that's where the event was. But then it was probably about a year later that I first came back to the UU for the first time on a Sunday to go, and I saw that banner and I saw that statement, and it did signal to me that I was in the right place again, and that I was welcome there, and that it was a place where my experiences of what it means to be living here, part of this movement, and figuring all this stuff out was sort of just acknowledged. Like, it was an acknowledgement that I don't ever, or rarely, I can't think of ever seeing, feeling in other events that I go to in Bismarck and Mandan. So, so that's part of what that, I think that this practice of how powerful acknowledgement can be. And we've talked in different groups that I'm part of, like the Social Action Working Group, and about, the need to change that, to change what that banner says, or what that being there. And we've talked about replacing it with some formal land acknowledgement that is more inclusive of, not just, doesn't name just Standing Rock, but the other Indigenous people here. So that claim belonging here. And I think that I'm in support of that idea. And I think I've prepared for a long time for this, and I have like so much that I could say, but I feel like it's probably also a good time to wrap up. But I'm doing this, the final piece that I wanted to share about this is, like, I really feel deeply that we all belong to the earth. The earth is something that we all have in common. That's a Wendell Berry quote, I think. And that practice of asserting that belonging, or just claiming that, is something that I found to be really healing and important. And I'm going to share, just so that reminds me that I was going to share a few words. So Prentice Hemphill is an organizer, formerly with Black Lives Matter, and does a lot of amazing stuff. And I was listening to an interview with them, and they shared actually, they shared a practice about generating a sense of belonging, sort of like a meditative practice. And they said this concept of belonging, I think for many of us, it feels tenuous, up for debate, conditional. And for a lot of people, oppressed folks, or disabled folks, or Black folks, or trans folks, women, queer folks, children, and I would extend this to be just about everyone. We have to expend a lot of energy throughout our days, throughout our lives, asserting our humanity. And And through that, we come to, or we have to spend a lot of energy asserting our humanity and recovering from the ways we're unseen or not listened to or excluded. And through these experiences, we come to understand belonging as something that is extended to us, that's offered to us. And we want to, and so then they offer this practice to take some time to intentionally explore the ways in which belonging is a decision that we make, and how to cultivate an internal and also just a broader sense of belonging, and how to make space to reflect and connect to a belonging that isn't tenuous or up for debate. And in the practice, they like lead a meditation in thinking of situations in where you really feel a sense of belonging, and giving examples of, like, it could be to, you don't have to be to people, it can be to dancing or singing or a place or places, and then also contrasting that with when you don't feel, when you feel like your belonging is up for debate. So I guess one of the things I also want to leave you with is the statement that we need, which I believe, is that we need to counter sort of the disruption and disconnect that that happens when we're, particularly when we're disconnected from the earth. We need to cultivate strategies for relationship building and relationship deepening, and look beyond territorial boundaries. So I want to just close by saying how sort of asserting or stating my belonging to you all as a UU community. And for me, one of the most meaningful and live aspects of what keeps me coming back to this group is that one of our 7 principles is an acceptance of one another and an encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. And Adrienne Mary Brown is a writer and thinker and person who I admire a lot and been reading and listening to. I have her book right here, or one of her books right here. And in this, she talks about radical imagination and sort of aligning ourselves with natural forces in nature, and talks about coevolution through friendship. And I would extend this to coevolution through fellowship. And I'm going to sort of take her words and apply them to us. So among you and with you as a group, I have found people with whom I'm intentionally growing. People who will hold me accountable to my own development. Often the biggest support we need is to speak the truth out loud to those who will hold it with us from a vantage point of unconditional love. I too have been supported, inspired, encouraged, and witnessed by a marvelous circle full of people in their own growth. May we be committed to our own self-transformation. May we see ourselves as microcosms of the world and work to shift oppressive patterns in our bodies, hearts, minds, speech, and interactions. May we have curiosity about our lives as learning labs for our values and figuring out what it means to be human in this moment in time. Our lives are our life's work. A lot of us can identify with that. What matters is that we are authentic with the questions, that we believe the answers are important, and that we listen to each other accordingly. We offer each other vulnerable reflection. We reach out to each other with our joys and concerns, with our hopes and our fears, and ask others to be mirrors for us at our most vulnerable places so that we can see that we are learning. We see new possibilities in our lives. When I am feeling fragmented or limited, seeing you in your wholeness, as you have the courage and wisdom to name and sit with your brokenness, reminds me of my own capacity. And as I stand in my wholeness, which includes being more honest with myself and others about what I want and who I am in the world, it exerts pressure on others, both to receive me and to become more whole in themselves.
So singing together, I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like the ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul.
Thank you, Alicia. So at this time, we'll accept the offering. We can't pass the basket, but please continue to pay your pledge as you are able. Colleen Reinke made the suggestion that if you end up with a check from the government that you don't really need, you might share it with somebody in the fellowship who's taken a financial hit, and you can do that directly or through the minister's discretionary fund. You can call the office if you need help figuring out how to pay your pledge in these times. And thank you for your many gifts for the life and work of our fellowship. I also want to thank the Unitarian Universalist Association for all their encouragement and help that they are offering ministers and congregations right now. There are a couple of announcements this week. Keep meeting virtually, and I'm paying attention to who's on this call and who's not, and I'm guessing some of the people not on are because they don't know how to use Zoom. So if you're able to call and walk somebody through that, that would be wonderful. The White Fragility book group is still on hold. In solidarity and care for one another, the Mid-America region of the UUA is transitioning our regional assembly, scheduled for April 18th in Rockford, Illinois, to a virtual event on Zoom. So that really works to our advantage. There's not 2 days of travel to get there. The cost is also now only $50 to attend, so I think the congregation can pay for you if you're interested in doing that. If you'd like to attend our regional assembly, just let me know. And finally, if you haven't heard, I wanted to share some good news. I'd like to read a portion of a press release so you know how things stand. A federal court today granted a request by the Standing Rock Sioux tribe to strike down federal permits for the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline. The court found the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers violated the National Environmental Policy Act when it affirmed federal permits for the pipeline originally issued in 2016. So that's really good news. They're still deciding if that means they have to cease production or sending oil through until the environmental statements are done correctly or impact investigation is done correctly. So there's still more work to be done, but a good start. All right. I'd like to encourage you all to keep calling one another, to attend your chalice groups, to stay in touch during this challenging time. And Alicia will now lead us in our closing song.
We have spent time together, and these holy moments give us strength to go down the winding road until we meet again. We have spent time together, and these holy moments give us strength to go down the winding road until we meet again. And my prayer for you is a peace that's true until we meet again.
All right, and finally, I'll share these final words, closing words, and then we can all together blow out our candles. These come from Adrienne Marie Brown in Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds. Our radical imagination is a tool for decolonization, for reclaiming our right to shape our lived reality. I believe that we are part of a natural world that is constantly changing, and we need to learn to adapt together and stay in relationship if we hope to survive as a species.
All right, go in peace, everyone.
I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace